The morning of our fifth wedding anniversary dawned with the kind of soft, ethereal light that photographers dream of, filtering through the mature maple trees of Greenwood Hills. I woke up with a placid smile already on my lips, cocooned in the impossibly soft Egyptian cotton sheets of the king-sized bed my husband Brian and I had chosen together on a happy, sun-drenched Saturday 3 years ago. The rich, invigorating scent of dark roast coffee, a daily ritual he'd steadfastly maintained since we were newlyweds, was already drifting up the grand staircase from our state-of-the-art kitchen. It was one of the small, consistent acts of service that made me feel so deeply and securely loved. I stretched, a contented sigh escaping my lips, my bare feet finding the familiar, cool, smooth grain of the hand-scraped hardwood floors. I padded over to the large bay window that overlooked our sprawling backyard. My garden, my personal sanctuary, and the product of countless hours of loving labor, was bathed in the gentle, golden glow of the Illinois sunrise. At the very heart of the property, a silent, majestic sentinel, stood the ancient oak tree. Its gnarled branches, thick as a man's waist, were like strong, protective arms reaching for the vast, pale blue sky. In that singular, perfect moment, everything felt right. The life Brian and I had built here, in this beautiful house, in this quiet, affluent suburb of Chicago, felt as solid and enduring as that very tree. He, a charismatic and relentlessly ambitious financial advisor, and I, the inheritor of a modest but significant family trust left by my dear parents, had merged our worlds to create this idyllic existence. I often felt a surge of overwhelming gratitude for it all. I slipped on my favorite silk robe, its fabric cool against my skin, and descended the sweeping staircase, the curve of the polished banister familiar under my hand. My heart swelled with a quiet, profound love for the man I was about to greet. Brian was standing at the massive granite island in the kitchen, his back to me, wearing the soft, gray cashmere sweater I'd bought him for his last birthday. He turned as my slippered feet whispered on the travertine tile, but the warm, crinkly-eyed smile I had anticipated seeing, the one that always made me feel like the center of his universe, was conspicuously absent. Instead, his expression was unnervingly neutral, almost clinical, his handsome features set like a mask. "Happy anniversary, Grace," he said, his voice completely level, devoid of its usual warmth. He gestured with his chin toward a single long object wrapped crudely in plain brown craft paper, leaning against a bar stool. There was no festive ribbon, no thoughtful card peeking out from a fold, just a stark utilitarian package that seemed jarringly out of place in our meticulously decorated, professionally designed home. "Happy anniversary, my love," I replied, forcing a brightness into my voice to combat the sudden, unwelcome flicker of unease that had sparked in my gut. I walked over and pressed a kiss to his cheek. It felt cool and unresponsive beneath my lips. "What's this?" I asked, my voice a little too light, a little too cheerful. "You know we agreed on the no gifts, just a big party rule this year." He had been the one to insist on it, framing it as a chance for us to celebrate with the people who mattered most. In reality, I knew he had poured weeks into planning tonight's lavish, catered affair, meticulously curating the guest list to include his most important clients and influential colleagues. It was as much a networking event as a celebration of our marriage. "I know," he said, his eyes finally meeting mine. They were flat, like polished stones, holding none of their usual affectionate light. "But I saw this and thought of you, of us. It's for the future." His words were meant to be reassuring, but they hung in the heavy air with a strange, ominous weight. I turned to the package and carefully tore at the thick paper. It fell away to reveal a brand-new, heavy-duty shovel. Its long wooden handle was smooth and polished, its sharpened steel blade gleaming under the recessed lighting. I stared at it, utterly bewildered. A shovel? For our fifth wedding anniversary? My mind scrambled, desperately trying to find a logical, loving explanation. Was this some bizarre, elaborate joke? A clumsy metaphor for digging in for the long haul of our marriage? It felt profoundly strange, almost menacing. I looked up at him, a confused, hesitant laugh ready on my lips, but the cold, impassive look on his face stopped it cold in my throat. This was no joke. The silence in the kitchen stretched out, becoming thick and suffocating. The comforting, familiar scent of brewing coffee now seemed acrid and cloying. I held the shovel, its unexpected weight both unfamiliar and deeply unnerving in my hands. The polished wood felt slick. The steel blade seemed to absorb the warmth of the room, remaining unnaturally cold. "A shovel, Brian?" I finally managed to say, my voice a strained whisper that was barely audible over the hum of the refrigerator. I don't understand. Is this for the new rose garden we talked about?" I offered him an out, a plausible, sweet reason for this bizarre gift. He could have just agreed, laughed it off as a practical present, and the strange tension would have dissipated. But he didn't. He took a slow, deliberate sip of his coffee, his eyes, those cold, flat stones, fixed on me over the rim of the expensive ceramic mug I'd bought him. The man I had loved for 7 years, married for 5, the man I thought I knew better than my own heart, suddenly looked like a complete and utter stranger. The familiar lines of his face seemed harder, his jaw set in a rigid line I'd only ever seen when he was closing a particularly ruthless deal at work. "It's practical," he said, setting the mug down on the granite with a soft, definitive click. "The garden needs work. I thought you could make a start." My swirling confusion curdled into a cold, creeping dread that started in the pit of my stomach and spread through my limbs like ice water. My garden was my sanctuary, my passion project. I spent countless hours there every week, meticulously tending to my prize-winning David Austin roses, nurturing my vibrant hydrangeas, ensuring every petal and leaf was perfect. It didn't need work. It was immaculate. It was the one part of our shared life that was wholly, unequivocally mine. "What work?" I asked, my grip tightening on the smooth wooden handle until my knuckles were white. "Where, exactly?" He leaned forward slightly, his body language shifting from passive to predatory. His voice dropped to a low, deliberate tone, a voice he used with subordinates, not with his wife, and it sent a terrifying shiver down my spine. "Start by the old oak tree." My blood ran cold and the air rushed from my lungs. The oak tree. It wasn't just a tree, it was the sacred anchor of our property, the silent, steadfast witness to our life here. We'd had lazy summer picnics under its sprawling canopy. I'd read countless books in its dappled shade, and we'd watched thunderstorms roll in from the safety of our porch, its mighty silhouette a symbol of our own strength and permanence. I'd even, years ago, shown him the small, faded carving my father had made in its trunk when I was a little girl, my initials inside a heart. There was nothing there that needed digging. The grass was a perfect, unbroken carpet of emerald green, the surrounding hosta beds pristine and lush. His instruction wasn't a casual suggestion. It was a command, loaded with a dark, unspoken meaning I couldn't begin to grasp, but felt in the very marrow of my bones. This was a test. Or worse, a threat. My mind raced, desperately trying to find a logical reason, any benign explanation for his terrifyingly specific demand. Had he buried a surprise for me? A secret anniversary gift? A time capsule for us to open in 20 years? No. His face held no joy, no playful secret. It held only a cold, chilling, and unwavering expectation. I looked from the gleaming shovel to his impassive face, and a horrible, gaping chasm opened up in my world. The perfect, happy life I had woken up to this morning was a fragile, beautiful illusion, and he had just handed me the tool with which to shatter it completely. "Why, Brian?" I pleaded, my voice trembling on the verge of breaking. "Why there? Of all places, why there?" He offered a thin, cruel smile that didn't come anywhere near his eyes. It was a predator's smile. "You've always been so good at keeping things buried, Grace," he said, his voice a venomous whisper. "I just thought you could use a hand." With that, he turned, picked up his sleek leather briefcase, straightened his tie, and walked out the back door to the garage, leaving me utterly alone with the shovel, his cryptic command, and the sudden, terrifying certainty that my husband wanted me to dig up a secret I didn't even know I had. I stood frozen in the cavernous kitchen for what felt like an eternity, the shovel still clutched in my hand like a bizarre medieval weapon. The house, which had always been my source of comfort and security, now felt vast, empty, and hostile. Every familiar shadow seemed to lengthen and twist into a menacing shape. Every normal creak of the old house settling sounded like a furtive footstep in the hall. Brian's parting words echoed relentlessly in the echo chamber of my mind. You've always been so good at keeping things buried. What in God's name did that mean? I had no dark secrets, no skeletons rattling in my closet. My life, for better or worse, had been an open book, especially to him. I had shared every insecurity, every childhood memory, every foolish dream. Was this about my inheritance? The trust my parents had left me was the foundation of our current wealth, the seed capital from which Brian's own impressive career had blossomed. He'd used it to secure the loans that launched his advisory firm. Had he, over the years, come to resent that fact? To resent me for it? The questions swirled in my head, a vortex of fear, each one more frightening and painful than the last. I felt a wave of pure panic rising in my chest, hot and tight, and I leaned against the counter, struggling to breathe. I needed to talk to someone. I needed an anchor in this surreal, waking nightmare. My fingers, clumsy and shaking with adrenaline, found my phone on the counter. I scrolled with my thumb through my contacts, past the caterer, the florist, the party planner, until I found the only name that came to mind. Jessica. My best friend since our freshman year of college. Jess was my polar opposite in almost every way. Where I was gentle, accommodating, and perhaps overly trusting, she was sharp, brilliantly cynical, and so fiercely loyal it was almost frightening. She answered on the second ring, her voice a welcome, grounding splash of normalcy in my chaotic morning. Hey, birthday girl! Or is it anniversary girl? Getting ready for the big bash tonight. Don't tell me Brian already gave you the diamond earrings you've been hinting about. I tried to form a cheerful, normal reply, but a choked, ragged sob escaped instead. The sound was ugly and raw. Grace? Whoa, what is it? What's wrong? She asked instantly, her tone shifting from breezy and playful to laser-focused and serious. I sank onto one of the kitchen stools, the polished steel of the shovel pressing coldly against my leg, a tangible reminder of the morning's horror. It's Brian, I whispered, the words finally tumbling out in a disorganized, frantic rush. I told her everything. The coldness in his eyes, the strange giftless package, the shovel itself, and the chillingly specific instruction to dig by our sacred oak tree. I repeated his last cryptic sentence, my voice breaking on the word buried. There was a long, thoughtful pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear the gears turning in her pragmatic, analytical mind. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, devoid of any warmth, and utterly serious. Grace, listen to me very carefully. Put the phone on speaker and sit down. This is not a joke. This is not some weird, misguided romantic gesture. Men, even the clueless ones, do not do this. Normal, loving husbands do not give their wives a heavy-duty shovel on their 5th wedding anniversary and tell them to start digging under a specific tree. Her words, so stark and logical, cut through the fog of my panicked confusion like a knife. He's playing a game, Grace, a cruel, twisted psychological game, and he wants you to be a player. But why? I cried, tears I hadn't realized I was holding back now streaming hotly down my face. What did I do? This isn't about what you did, Jess said, her voice hardening with an anger that was entirely on my behalf. This is about him. Something is very, very wrong. You said he's been distant lately, right? Working late? More secretive with his phone? I nodded, even though she couldn't see me, my mind suddenly connecting dots I hadn't wanted to see. Yes, I whispered. For months. I just thought he was stressed about a big deal at work, a new merger. Or maybe the big deal has a name and wears expensive perfume, she muttered darkly. Look, you have 2 choices right now. You can ignore it, pretend it didn't happen, and spend your entire anniversary party tonight walking on eggshells, watching him for clues. Or you can find out what the hell he's hiding. The thought of digging, of potentially finding something terrible, absolutely terrified me. But the thought of not knowing, of living in this new, cold reality with a man who was suddenly a stranger, was infinitely worse. You have to dig, Grace, Jess said softly, as if she were reading my mind. You have to know what he's buried there. You have to know what you're fighting. Dusk began to bleed across the sky, painting the high, thin clouds in bruised, moody shades of purple and orange. The catering team had come and gone, their quiet efficiency transforming our home into a stage for a grand performance. Crisp white linens draped the tables arranged artfully across the backyard. Hundreds of tiny fairy lights twinkled like captured stars in the branches of the trees, and the air was filled with the sophisticated mingling scents of lilies, gardenias, and roasting rosemary from the portable warming ovens. It was a picture of effortless elegance and celebration, a perfect setting for a happy, successful couple's milestone anniversary. But for me, it felt like a funeral, the set for a tragedy. All day I had moved through the preparations in a thick, surreal daze, my smile a fragile, paper-thin mask, my mind utterly consumed by one single terrifying thought: the oak tree. Jess's words had become my mantra, a grim drumbeat in my head. You have to know. You have to know what you're fighting. I couldn't face a crowd of people, couldn't stand beside Brian and graciously accept congratulations on our perfect marriage without knowing what lay buried beneath that tree. After the last caterer drove away, and with 2 hours to go before the first guests were scheduled to arrive, I made my decision. The back and forth in my mind ceased. There was only one path forward. I went upstairs and changed out of the linen dress I'd been wearing, my movements furtive and silent, as if I were a burglar in my own home. I pulled on a pair of old faded jeans and a dark long-sleeve sweater, clothes for doing a dirty job. I slipped out the back door, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs, and grabbed the shovel from where I'd hidden it in the back of the pantry, behind a stack of bulk paper towels. The evening air was cool and heavy with the smell of freshly cut grass and impending rain. The fairy lights, meant to be festive, cast a magical, deceptive glow, making the familiar, beloved landscape of my garden seem alien and strange. My heart hammered against my ribs with a painful, frantic rhythm as I crossed the perfectly manicured lawn. Each step felt like a step toward a cliff's edge in the dark. The ancient oak tree loomed before me, its massive branches like dark, skeletal fingers against the fading light. Brian's words guided me. Start by the old oak tree. But where? The base was enormous. I circled the massive trunk, my eyes scanning the ground, my breath held tight in my chest. Then I saw it. A small, almost imperceptible rectangular patch of grass, slightly discolored, the turf not quite settled, a shade yellower than the surrounding lawn. It was a spot no one else would ever notice, but to my newly suspicious, hyper-vigilant eyes, it screamed of recent disturbance. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely get a firm grip on the shovel. I plunged the sharp, cold blade of the shovel into the earth. The sound was a violent, tearing slash, ripping through the evening's pastoral quiet. It felt like a profound desecration, a violation of my most sacred space. I dug with a desperate, wild energy, fueled by a potent cocktail of fear, adrenaline, and a rising tide of white-hot anger. Clods of dark, rich soil, the soil I had lovingly amended and fertilized for years, flew over my shoulder, staining my clothes and my skin. The work was brutally hard, and my unaccustomed muscles screamed in protest, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. I dug deeper and deeper, tears of frustration and terror mixing with the sweat on my brow, dripping from my chin. Was I insane? Was this all in my head? Was I destroying my own garden, my own peace of mind, for nothing more than a cruel, meaningless prank? Just as I was about to give up, to throw the shovel down and surrender to the encroaching madness, the steel blade struck something hard with a dull, sickening, metallic thud. It wasn't a rock. It was a flat, unyielding surface. My breath caught in my throat, a painful, sharp gasp. With trembling, raw hands, I scraped away the remaining dirt, my fingers digging into the cool, damp soil. Slowly, an object came into view. It was a dark green metal box, a military-style footlocker, about the size of a shoebox, its surface cold and damp with the Earth's condensation. It wasn't a treasure chest. It was a lockbox. And the latch wasn't locked. He'd left it open for me. My fingers, clumsy and stiff, fumbled with the cold metal clasp on the box. My knuckles were scraped raw and caked with dark, heavy soil. For a long, heart-stopping moment, I hesitated, my hand hovering over the latch. Whatever was inside this box was the answer to everything. The reason for the shovel, the chilling emptiness in my husband's eyes, the terrifying shift in our life. Once I opened it, there was no going back. The life I knew, the the deep and trusting love I had cherished as the cornerstone of my world, would be irrevocably over. Taking a deep, ragged breath that shuddered through my entire body, I finally flipped the latch. The lid creaked open with a sound of finality, releasing a faint, stale odor of paper and dust. I peered inside, my eyes struggling to adjust in the deepening twilight, the whimsical fairy lights now seeming to mock me. What I saw made the air leave my lungs in a single, painful, whooshing gasp. My entire world tilted on its axis. The box was not just evidence. It was a meticulously curated collection of betrayal. It was a horrifying testament to a secret, parallel life. A world of deceit Brian had been expertly living right under my nose, in our home, in our bed. On the very top lay a thick stack of photographs, printed on glossy, high-quality paper. The woman in them was young, probably 10 years my junior, with a mane of fiery red hair and a triumphant, predatory smile. She was wrapped around Brian, her body pressed against his, kissing him on the deck of a sailboat on Lake Michigan, laughing with him at a corner table at Gibson's Steakhouse, her hand placed with casual intimacy on his chest. In one particularly galling photo, she was preening for the camera, wearing a stunning vintage diamond necklace I had never seen before. Except I had. It was the one that had gone missing from my jewelry box 6 months ago, the one that had belonged to my grandmother, the one I had been heartsick over losing. My stomach heaved, and I had to swallow back a wave of bitter bile. Beneath the photos were neat stacks of receipts, held together with paper clips. Dozens and dozens of them. Lavish dinners, 5-star hotel stays at the peninsula on nights he was supposedly working late to close a deal. Charges from designer boutiques on Michigan Avenue for handbags and expensive lingerie. It was all there. A detailed chronological accounting of his affair, paid for from our joint accounts, from my money. My hands were shaking so violently now that I could barely lift the next layer of documents. They were bank statements, printed out and highlighted, for an account I didn't know existed. An offshore account in the Cayman Islands, in his name only. I saw the systematic, calculated transfers. Small, insignificant amounts at first, a few $1,000s here and there, then larger and larger sums, tens of thousands at a time, siphoned with chilling precision from our shared finances over the past 2 years. He had been slowly, methodically bleeding me dry, moving my family's legacy into his own secret coffers. But the final item, nestled at the very bottom of the box, was what truly shattered the last remnant of my soul. It was a sheaf of legal papers, still in draft form but chillingly complete, from a law firm I'd never heard of. The header read in stark black letters, "Petition for guardianship of Grace Connolly." He had been consulting with a lawyer to have me declared mentally incompetent. The draft was filled with fabricated anecdotes, citing my increasingly erratic behavior, my emotional instability, and my inability to manage complex financial matters following the death of my parents. The shovel, the digging, the oak tree, it all clicked into place with horrifying, breathtaking clarity. He hadn't buried this to hide it from me. He had buried it for me to find. He was building his case. He wanted me to become hysterical, to fall apart, to run screaming into the party, thereby proving him right. This wasn't just an affair. It was a meticulously planned coup. He wasn't just leaving me. He was planning to utterly destroy me, to erase me, and to take everything I had. I knelt there in the dirt, a ghost at my own party. The sordid evidence of my husband's profound treachery spread before me, under the mocking, festive twinkle of the fairy lights. The shock was a physical blow, a concussive force that hollowed me out completely, leaving a silent, screaming void where my heart used to be. For a few long, timeless minutes, I couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't even breathe. The man I loved, the kind, funny, supportive partner I had built my life with, didn't exist. He was a fiction I had co-written, a character I had created out of my own love and trust. The real author was a monster. The image of his cold, expectant face from that morning returned to me, and the grief, the deep, soul-crushing grief of that loss, was suddenly and violently consumed by a wave of pure, ice-cold rage. It was a fury so clean and clarifying it burned away my tears. He had underestimated me. He had fundamentally misjudged my character. He had mistaken my kindness for weakness, my unwavering trust for stupidity. He had orchestrated this entire sick psychodrama, expecting me to have a hysterical weeping breakdown, to run to him crying and confused, to give him the final piece of ammunition he needed to paint me as an unhinged, unstable woman to his friends and colleagues. He wanted a scene. Well, he was going to get one, but it would be on my terms, not his. I carefully, methodically placed every photograph, every receipt, every damning page of that vile legal petition back into the metal box. I wiped the dirt from its dark green surface with the sleeve of my sweater, closed the lid, and tucked it firmly under my arm. My movements were no longer frantic or fearful. They were deliberate, imbued with a newfound and terrifying purpose. I walked back into the house, my muddy jeans and dirt-stained hands a stark, jarring contrast to the pristine elegance of the party setting. I went straight upstairs to our master suite, bypassing the beautiful cream-colored anniversary dress from Neiman Marcus that was laid out carefully on my side of the bed. Instead, I stripped off my soiled clothes and stepped into the shower, letting the hot water wash away the dirt, the sweat, and the last vestiges of my naive belief in him. I was washing away the old Grace. When I stepped out, I chose a different dress from my closet, a simple, powerful sheath of crimson red. It was a dress I had always felt strong in. It was a color of strength, of passion, of warning. As I did my makeup, I saw a new person reflected in the mirror. The soft, trusting light in my eyes was gone, replaced by a hard, determined, crystalline fire. My phone buzzed on the vanity where I'd left it. It was Jess. "Grace, are you okay? I'm 10 minutes out. What did you find? Talk to me." Her voice was fraught with a worry that warmed me to my core. I took a deep, steadying breath, my own voice surprisingly calm and even when I answered. "I found everything, Jess." In a low, clipped tone, I summarized the contents of the box. The affair, the stolen money, the heirloom necklace, and the ultimate betrayal, the plan to have me declared incompetent. I heard her sharp intake of breath, followed by a string of creative and deeply satisfying curses directed at Brian. "That absolute monster," she seethed. "That sociopath. What are you going to do? I'll come over right now. We can pack your things. You can leave before he even gets home." "No," I said, my decision solidifying into bedrock with every word I spoke. "I'm not running. He spent weeks planning this party, gathering all his important clients and colleagues, the very people he wants to impress with his stolen wealth and manufactured success. He has built his entire reputation in this town on a foundation of lies. It would be a terrible shame for it to all come crashing down in one spectacular night." There was a pregnant pause on the line, and then I heard the slow, admiring smile enter Jess's voice. "Oh, you are going to burn it all to the ground, aren't you?" "He's the one who gave me the shovel, Jess," I replied, snapping the metal box shut with a click that echoed in the quiet room. "I'm just going to help him dig his own grave." The party was in full, glorious swing. The low thrum of polite laughter and the smooth, sophisticated sounds of a live jazz trio filled the cool night air. Brian, ever the charismatic consummate host, moved through the throng of guests with a glass of expensive champagne in his hand, shaking hands, clapping backs, exuding an aura of effortless success and contentment. He was radiant, a perfect portrait of a man at the top of his game. From across the lawn he caught my eye as I emerged from the house. He gave me a small, knowing, triumphant smile, a look that said, "Did you find it? Are you ready to fall apart for me?" I simply smiled back, a calm, serene Mona Lisa expression that I knew would unnerve him far more than tears, and took a delicate sip of my own champagne. Jess found me by the French doors, her eyes blazing with righteous fury. "He's a piece of work," she whispered, discreetly handing me the heavy metal box, which I'd asked her to bring in and hold for me. "The redhead is here, by the way. Name's Tiffany, over by the bar schmoozing with the Martins. And yes, she's wearing your grandmother's necklace." A fresh, sharp stab of pain and fury went through me, but I forced my expression to remain placid. It only solidified my resolve. This had to be done. I waited. I let him bask in the glowing adoration of his peers and clients. I watched him accept congratulations on his beautiful wife, his beautiful home, his beautiful life. I let him climb to the very pinnacle of his self-made mountain. The perfect moment came, just as I knew it would, when he stepped onto the small, temporary dais the caterers had set up and tapped a knife against his glass for a toast. The crowd quieted instantly, their smiling, adoring faces turning toward him. "Thank you all so much for coming," he began, his voice smooth as silk, raising his glass. He put an arm around my waist, beckoning me to his side. His touch felt like a viper's coil. "To 5 wonderful years with my beautiful, loving wife, Grace. She is my rock, my partner in everything. Our life together is a testament to what can be built on a foundation of love and, most importantly, of absolute trust." The sheer, breathtaking hypocrisy of his words was so staggering, it almost made me laugh out loud. As the guests raised their glasses in unison and murmured their approval, I gently but firmly removed his arm from my waist and took a small step forward. "Brian, that's beautiful," I said, my voice clear and steady, carrying with perfect clarity across the silent yard. "But you forgot to mention your anniversary gift." A flicker of confusion, then palpable alarm crossed his handsome face. He hadn't expected this. He'd expected tears or silence. I walked calmly to the small table where Jess had placed the box, and I picked it up. All eyes, now curious, were on me. "This morning, for our 5th wedding anniversary, my husband gave me a shovel," I announced into the microphone he had just used. A nervous, confused titter went through the crowd. "He told me our garden needed work, and that I should start digging by the old oak tree. It was a strange request, but he assured me it was for us. So, being the trusting wife I am, I did." I placed the box on the table and flipped open the lid. Brian's face went bone white. "Grace, what are you doing?" he hissed, his voice a low, panicked growl. "This isn't the time." I ignored him, my gaze fixed on his most important client, a stern-faced, powerful man named Mr. Donovan, standing in the front row. I thought I might find a romantic surprise. Instead, I said, pulling out the first photograph of him kissing Tiffany, I found the real reason for all those late nights at the office. I held it up. A collective, audible gasp rippled through the guests. Tiffany, over by the bar, looked like she'd been struck by lightning. "I also found out where my grandmother's heirloom diamond necklace went," I said, my eyes locking on the woman, who instinctively clutched at her throat, her face turning a blotchy red. Then I pulled out the bank statements. "And I discovered the secret to my husband's recent financial genius. It seems the best way to get rich is to have a wife with a substantial trust fund and absolutely no access to the secret offshore accounts you're funding with it." The murmurs grew louder, turning to open, horrified shock. Brian grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my skin. "That's enough," he snarled. I shook him off with a strength that surprised us both, my voice ringing with a power I didn't know I possessed. No, the best part, the real testament to his love and trust, was this. I held up the final damning document. A legal petition to have me declared mentally incompetent so he could seize control of everything. He wanted me to dig it up. He was hoping I'd make a scene. I looked around at the stunned, disgusted faces of his friends, his colleagues, his entire world. "So, here's to you, Brian. You wanted a scene. I truly hope you enjoy it." The silence that followed my final word was absolute, profound, and devastating. It was as if a soundproof dome had descended upon the backyard, trapping us all in the wreckage. It was the ringing silence of a bomb having gone off, the glittering, elegant facade of the party having been utterly blasted away, revealing the ugly, rotten, and corrupt structure beneath. For a long, stunned moment, no one moved. Then, Tiffany the redhead, her face a mask of scarlet shame and terror, turned and practically fled. She didn't walk, she ran, pushing past stunned guests and disappearing into the darkness of the front street, the sound of her heels clattering on the pavement the only sound in the night. Brian stood frozen on the dais, his face ashen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. The easy charm had vanished, the confident charisma stripped away, leaving only a hollow, pathetic, and exposed man, blinking in the spotlight of the very party he had orchestrated to celebrate his own greatness. One of his most important clients, the stern-faced and famously principled Mr. Donovan, was the first to react. He looked from the documents in my hand to Brian's horrified face, and his expression hardened into one of pure, unadulterated disgust. He set his untouched champagne flute down on a nearby table with a decisive, sharp clink that echoed across the lawn. He gave a curt, dismissive shake of his head at Brian, a gesture of final judgment, and turned to his wife. "Catherine, we're leaving." His departure was the signal for a mass exodus. It was a quiet, orderly, and brutal stampede of social repudiation. No one said a word to Brian. They didn't need to. They simply turned their backs on him, their faces a damning mixture of pity, revulsion, and cold contempt. The world he had so painstakingly built, the network of powerful people he had courted and deceived, dissolved in a matter of minutes. They walked past me with quiet, sympathetic nods, their eyes telling me everything I needed to know. I had not been judged. He had. Within 15 minutes, the yard was empty, save for the abandoned tables, the wilting flower arrangements, the half-eaten food, and my husband, standing utterly alone amidst the complete wreckage of his life. Jess was by my side, her hand a warm, steady, and grounding presence on my back. I didn't look at Brian. I didn't need to. I had already won. The aftermath was as swift and decisive as the public shaming. The metal box contained all the proof my powerhouse divorce attorney needed. The dated photographs, the signed credit card receipts, the highlighted bank statements. It was an ironclad, undeniable case of fraud and dissipation of marital assets. The draft of the guardianship petition was the final, brutal nail in his coffin, proof of such profound malicious intent that it visibly horrified the judge. Brian, predictably, tried to fight it, hiring an expensive legal team to paint me as vindictive and unstable, but his reputation in Greenwood Hills and the Chicago financial community was in tatters. Mr. Donovan and several other former clients pulled their multi-million-dollar portfolios from his firm the very next day, and the story of his spectacular public downfall became the quiet, cautionary talk of the town. In the end, he was left with virtually nothing. The divorce was granted, our assets were divided based on his egregious fraud, meaning I retained my entire inheritance and the house. He was left with his staggering legal debts and his indelible shame. I never spoke to him again. Months later, on a quiet, sun-drenched Sunday afternoon, I stood at my kitchen window, looking out at my garden. The rectangular patch of disturbed earth under the old oak tree had healed completely, covered now with a patch of lush, green grass, indistinguishable from the rest of the lawn. The garden was thriving, more beautiful and vibrant than ever. The house no longer felt hostile or haunted. It felt like home again. It was mine. The memory of that terrible night was no longer a source of sharp, radiating pain, but a strange, empowering scar. It was a reminder of my own resilience. Brian had given me a shovel, intending for me to dig my own emotional and financial grave. Instead, I had used it to unearth the truth, to reclaim my life, and to bury the ghost of the man I thought I loved. I was free. I took a deep breath of the clean air, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace.